It's difficult for me to think of a worse sequel than Red Faction 2. Devil May Cry 2, Perfect Dark Zero, and Dark Souls are certainly up there, but this one is special. Released only 20 months after the first game, Red Faction 1 perfectly set up for a groundbreaking sequel. You had this new game engine that could not only do something never before done in video games, but it could do it well. Never did I experience slowdown in the first game, regardless of how much terrain was destroyed. The only issue, and a critically important one, was that it never joined with the game design. Locked doors were common, and never did destroying the environment benefit the gameplay outside of a few scripted sequences specifically crafted by the designers. But there was something great in Red Faction, begging to be free. If only the developers could harmonize the two. I genuinely believe that Red Faction could have been bigger than Half-Life. The ramifications for a game that joined the geomod technology with game design that actually utilized it would have been revolutionary. What would game design look like when destruction isn't just a gimmick for a trailer, but a fundamental aspect of the gameplay? This would sting ever so slightly less if I didn't hate Red Faction 2. I hate that it was developed first for the PS2 and then poorly ported to PC. I hate that it therefore controls terribly. I hate that it runs worse than the first game. I hate that you have to actively search for instances of the geomod technology because most of the world in this game is indestructible. I hate the respawning enemies that give me a migraine. I hate Red Faction 2. It's not surprising it's a bad game, that is its reputation after all. What is surprising is my fond memories of this game. It's like remembering a childhood friend, only to travel back in time and find out they were a bully. Call it repression, call it being poor and playing only what I had access to. Call it being a dumb kid, there is no excusing it. Red Faction 2 is a terrible video game, not only because of its relation with its predecessor. It's a terrible video game because of all the mechanics that are meant to come together to create an enjoyable experience do the opposite. You are punished for killing enemies by them endlessly respawning. You are shown that destroying the environment will allow you to flank enemy turrets, and then have indestructible environments thrown in your face throughout the rest of the game. Red Faction 1 was no open world, but the clever level design always funneled you towards your next objective, while making you believe it was your doing, that you were guiding Parker forward. It felt open, despite most of it being set underground. The first thing you'll probably notice when starting Red Faction 2 is how terrible the mouse feels. I was hoping it was just a menu thing, since I'm using a widescreen patch and it wouldn't be an issue in game, but that was wishful thinking. The next thing you'll notice are the pre-scripted destruction animations when completing the very first objective in the game. It was at this point I was wondering if Red Faction 2 was a parody, a non-game made as a joke that my smooth child brain just didn't understand at the time. It's such a contrast to create a game engine that can beautifully handle destructible terrain and then within 10 seconds of starting the campaign, task the player with destroying turrets that fall over when dealt enough damage in order to trigger a canned animation that plays the same every time. After destroying these towers, you have to wait about 20 seconds for a gunship to come in and destroy the front gate before proceeding. It was at this point that I was wondering if I accidentally fucked the designer's wife, and this was his revenge on me. In a game marketed for its destruction, you have to wait for an NPC to open the very first door in the game? How did no one notice this? Did they just not care? Also, real quick, if you notice the FOV being kinda wonky, it's due to the widescreen patch I'm using. I've tried to edit most of it out, but this is your disclaimer. Red Faction 2 doesn't run nearly as well as the first game. Anyway, getting back to how much I hate this game. Thankfully it's short. HowLongToBeat.com says about 4.5 hours, but I finished it on medium in a little over 3. Now partially that was because I beelined it, but there's also not really much else to do. There are some side objectives, but they're always in your path, and generally consist of things like destroy all of X during this on-rail shooter section, no collectibles, branching paths, optional boss battles, etc., which I didn't really expect nor really want. I'm an amateur video making idiot, so bear with me because this is a little hard to explain. Level design is something where you don't notice it when it's good, but you certainly do when it's bad. How to articulate this in a video or with words, I'm not really sure. All I can say is I frequently got lost. About halfway through the game, you are in a mausoleum. That's basically a fancy word for a fancy graveyard, right? So anyway, there's this large, circular area with infinitely respawning enemies. There's more than a dozen doors and tombs here. They're all copy-pasted, have no cosmetic differences between them, there's no audio or objective clues on where to go, and there's no minimap or compass pointing you in a specific direction. I was stuck here for about 10 minutes before I just started trying every door. Turns out the semi-large one in the corner of the map with the exact same door as every other one is where you're supposed to go. How the player is supposed to know this, I have no idea. Also, you can mash the E interact key and it always makes this obnoxious noise. So that's kind of fun. Oh, and this game has loading screens. I don't think Red Faction 1 did, or if it did, they were so short and rare that I just never noticed. I definitely noticed them here though. An SSD turns them into nothing, but playing on an HDD like back in the day would have sucked. The guns are both better and worse than the first game. Dual wielding is in, and it's fun to use a left mouse button for your left gun and right mouse button for your right. Reminds me of Halo 2. There's also a lot of weapons, but there's not really an incentive to use anything but your favorite gun for most of the game. After getting the NICW early on, I used it almost exclusively. Ammo wasn't really much of a concern. It's also iconic as hell, far more than any gun in the first game. It acts kind of like an assault rifle, so it's super accurate, it holds 48 rounds, it looks awesome, and it shows enemies through walls so you're never surprised. Oh, and it also has ammo counters on the side of the gun itself, which is just neat looking. Oh, and it also has an underbarrel grenade launcher. What can it do? I'm a big fan of the art direction. You play as a nanotech enhanced super soldier named Alias.
Let's go, Alias.
Don't screw up, Alias.
Alias, don't shoot. It's us.
He's a demolitions expert, which plays perfectly into the geomod technology. And what's his primary weapon of choice? The grenade launcher, which, like the NICW, looks rad. I think all the characters in the game are inspired. They remind me of action figures I could have had as a kid. Everything feels like it fits the universe. The voice acting is also super well done and holds up today. The writing is cheesy, but it fits the tone.
How dare you threaten your Chancellor? Enough of this! I command you to surrender!
Lance Hendrickson and Jason Statham are the big voice actors, but even the smaller names do a great job.
I will use the nanotechnology as it should be used. I will create an army that cannot be defeated.
We trusted them. Hailed them as heroes. But they got the drop on us. Opened fire.
Ah, yeah. I witnessed it all.
Hero hid behind his desk.
Seems he didn't have a weapon.
It was symbolic. Our new government would have ushered in an era of peace.
Peace? Then what use would we be?
The textures are low res, but it's a PS2 game, so what do you want? The game has a real chunky look to it, but I don't mind. I mean, this is what, almost 2 years exactly from the PS2's release? It's certainly no Black or Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Before writing this review, I didn't even know there was a Star Wars The Force Unleashed on PS2. I might have to play this. It looks awesome. Look at those low polys. Beautiful. The effects are hit or miss. Explosions are serviceable, but the best weapon in the game sounds like a squeak toy. I wish the iconic design of it extended to its sound. I don't know, something akin to like the pulse rifle from Alien. The music though, like the first game, is still awesome. The antagonist is named Sopot. He's like a generic fascist dictator guy, and his speech is unforgettable.
We fight alone against an insidious enemy, an enemy who would destroy the Commonwealth, who would have our nation humbled from within.
We start the campaign, and Jason Statham is immediately telling us to murder people, right into the action. Looks like we're up against the cream of the crop. This guy's really fucking up that support beam. I already mentioned liking the art design, but the armor on my comrades here looks awesome. They're like sci-fi terror soldiers encased in metal. So we're assaulting this facility, which means destroying the guard tower so our gunship can blow the front gate. Then we can make our way inside the facility. Can't just destroy the front gate ourselves, of course. You might have noticed the greenery. We're no longer on Mars. Taking place 5 years after the first game, we're back on Earth and working for Sopot. Sopot tasks us with stealing nanotechnology from someone? The game doesn't really say. Anyway, we complete the prologue and run away from the explosion, so the light title card can play.
Red Faction 2.
Bishop from Alien sets up the plot.
Nanotechnology, created by an Ultor scientist on Mars. Stolen, brought to Earth. Stolen and stolen again.
Alias is part of a 6-person nanotech-enhanced top-tier death squad that answers to Chancellor Sopot, current-day dictator of the Commonwealth, who used the nanotechnology to create our squad. But now we have him spooked. We've grown too powerful, and him ever paranoid. So he's ordered us killed, thus setting up our motivation to align ourselves with the Red Faction, a ragtag group of freedom fighters led by Echo, a hippie who loves peace and good vibes. This Red Faction doesn't have anything to do with the miners from Mars, and there is no shared characters between the two games. Our squad consists of Shrike, Vehicles, Tangier, Stealth, Repta, Heavy Weapons, Quail, Sniper, Molov, Squad Leader, and ourselves, Explosives.
And he is Alias.
Molov tells us that Sopot dies tonight. The game suffers from texture poppin', but at least it has a consistent 60 FPS. Apparently Sopot's at the top of this TV station building, so we're making our way up there. We get some foreshadowing in the form of tension between the squad members, and then meet Tangier. There are non-combatants throughout the game, and if you kill enough of them, you get a bad ending, but we'll get to that later. I killed most of them I came across because evil playthroughs are always more interesting to me. I think KOTOR 2 still did the best implementation of this, and is a game I hope to cover in the future. Now this turret section is pretty cool. You have to blast a path for yourself to get behind it. Unfortunately, this is the second to last time the game will ever require destruction to progress in a semi-clever manner. Quill provides cover as a gunship pins us down. Then Repta joins us, and the game makes sure to give us a little interaction with all the squad members. We break into the TV studio, and the broadcaster has some self-referential commentary.
Reporting from within the besieged public information building in downtown Sopot City. An armed rebel is holding this reporter at gunpoint. But, thus far, he has not spoken a word or thought to use his weapon. Perhaps the terrorist actually respects this journalist's integrity.
But oh man, there is just constant enemies. There's so many that defeating them feels cheap. My dopamine centers become numb as I blow away the 100th enemy within the first hour of playing. We make our way to the roof as Shrike circles overhead. An enemy gunship is our first mini-boss, and say what you want of my strategy, but it works. Sopot makes his escape, but we pursue as Shrike picks us up. The next level only took about 5 minutes, but my god, it felt like an eternity. You're stuck in Shrike's gunship, gunning down Sopot's men, and the city looks nice at nighttime, but please god get me off this thing. I hate on-rails sections in games because rather than defending yourself with movement, you're constricted to kill enemies quickly enough, or it's game over. I hate having mobility taken from me. Fortunately, I get my wish, and we crash land into a sewer level, which makes me laugh because it's just the perfect stereotype, isn't it? Has a sewer level ever been good in a video game? This is one of the ugliest levels I've ever played. Not only is everything a shade of gray, but this level is so confusing, overly dark, and has these tiny flying robots that pepper you with shots. Oh, and there's also an underwater section too. Lovely. I was half expecting an escort mission to pop up, but I didn't get that lucky. We crawl out of the sewers and into the subway, stumbling upon a homeless man who kinda looks like my 9th grade science teacher. The train here is on a timer. When it comes, we have to destroy part of the wall to take shelter. It's neat, and not something the game tells you to do. You feel smart the first time you do it. Red Faction 2 can't have you feeling good for too long, so it throws dozens of tiny exploding robots at us. I got stuck here a few times before finding the exit, leading into a greater subway area. And again, I get stuck for a few minutes as I stumble around, trying to find the correct door that looks identical to every other door. Turns out you're supposed to just run down these specific tracks. Excuse me? Was I supposed to know that? I don't mean to complain so much, but getting lost in games is by far my biggest annoyance. It's the singular reason I've never finished a Souls game. It's not because they're difficult, which they are. It's because I lose track of where to go and don't know how to progress. Super frustrating. I'm an idiot who needs a compass or minimap. If you ever wonder who maps and games are made for, they're for people like me. We meet up with Quill and set explosives around the bridge supports. This is one area of the game with respawning enemies, so you just gotta get it done before you're killed. We blow the bridge, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why. But anyway, we run into Shrike who needs a gunner for his tank. What a coincidence, and let's just enjoy another on-rails level. Now to be fair, I feel defenseless when unable to move, but you're never at risk of dying during this section, so it's not too much of an issue. Taking a tour of the daytime is pretty nice too. I like Sopot's massive statues in the background. We reach a base Sopot is taking refuge in and continue on foot. There's a short section here where we use our night vision goggles, which drops the frame rate down to about 20. Sopot retreats underground and plans to self-explode the big ol' missile he's got stored down there. But we have other plans as we confront Sopot.
Respect Sopot! Fear Sopot! Sopot is your master!
For the honor of the Commonwealth, get your ass into the silo.
dare you threaten your Chancellor? Enough of this! I command you to surrender!
You killed Sopa! Congratulations, Alias! You saved the Commonwealth. The Red Faction will proclaim you a national hero.
Echo, no time for your politicking. Alias, get yourself out of there. Squad, regroup as planned at Red Faction HQ. Alias, my heroic demolitions expert. You are just in time for my announcement to the squad. Soapbot's armies have declared their loyalty to me. I am now Chancellor of the Republic of the Commonwealth.
I don't understand. I thought we supported
The Red Faction, yes, I know. I think we all agree that Echo here is an ass. Where we differ is that you and Tangier support the Red Faction. They would destroy the technology that created us. I will use the nanotechnology as it should be used. I will create an army that cannot be defeated.
We trusted them, hailed them as heroes. But they got the drop on us, opened fire.
Ah, yeah. I witnessed it all.
Hero hid behind his desk.
Seems he didn't have a weapon.
It was symbolic. Our new government would have ushered in an era of peace.
Peace? Then what use would we be? We were created to fight. When Tangier arrives, you three will be declared enemies of the state and publicly executed.
I don't think so. All of you, put down your weapons. I'd kill them all, but Molov's army would be on top of us. There's a passageway behind the banner. Get out of here. Molov has unleashed the processed and the military on the Red Faction.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure how Tangier got away, but whatever. There's not much of a difference between fighting Sopa or Molov. It's the same enemy types as before, dudes with guns and robots. There are some zombies too, and they also have guns. You do sometimes fight alongside Red Faction members, but it's not like Halo. These guys die instantly, and they don't really help. We make contact with Echo and agree to work together and meet up. Victor Sopa is one crazy mother. You gotta love the guy or you will die. All caps. Is this a joke? The game's tone is certainly lighthearted, but I don't get it. I'm assuming it's supposed to be funny? I don't know, kinda cringe bro, not gonna lie. Again, I get stuck for a few minutes trying all the doors. You gotta find this alley corner, then jump on this little box, the dumpster, then hop the wall. Very intuitive, Red Faction. The game's cutscenes really took a step back from the first game. Those cutscenes were hilarious, but at least they had soul. This is just a character model with a flapping mouth hole. Oh my god, they killed him. That guy whose name I remember. Let me check my notes. Oh, Echo! I've never felt more for a character's death. I'm full of anger and motivation to continue playing Red Faction 2. We make like a tree and enter the big graveyard I mentioned earlier. Quail's here, but we can't get to her yet. Now this area I wasted the most time in. I could not for the life of me figure out where to go. You'll want this big door over here, which triggers a short cutscene. We head under the big church and have our first boss battle. Quill is a sniper, but her AI is broken and pretty easy to exploit. It took me a couple lives to figure out, but you can stand in this corner here and just unload on her. It's a decent spot to avoid all of her infinitely respawning henchmen. She doesn't do much damage, but they do. Do enough damage and we got it. Something this game does, which I'm all for, is you get specialized weapons bosses used after defeating them. Quill's sniper is a beast. It has this enemy compass that lets you know the direction of any enemies. It's also semi-auto, holds a ton of ammo, and deals solid damage. We gotta wait for Tangier to pick us up, and this part is shameless. It really is just a shooting gallery. You can't approach enemies, and you can't do anything other than wait and shoot at them as they come out one by one. It's absolutely brazen in its laziness. Tangier comes after a few minutes and it's time for a subsection. This level has a nice look to it and it doesn't control terribly. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. It does a decent enough job at breaking up the game's pace, though I can't say I had fun playing it. Ships will drop bombs on you, and the enemy subs will fire back. As long as you're strafing, you're basically invulnerable, but you can't take many hits.
There's a tunnel up ahead. Maybe we can use it to evade the minefield.
We're heading to Sopot's lab, which Molov has taken as his own. Now he's using it to create mindless but loyal nanotech soldiers. Apparently Tangier's had a stroke and half her face is paralyzed, but she drops us off on one side of the lab while she takes the other.
Just saying, those things smell like roadkill.
The processed are the wave of the future, my friend. You and I might as well be dead.
Well, at least we bathe every now and then.
Tag, Alias. You're it.
Repta begins taunting us over comms, so he's clearly the next boss battle. The enemies in the lab are a mixture of Commonwealth soldiers, nanotech zombies, and Molov's new nanotech soldiers. They all fight the same, so it doesn't really matter. They have guns and either stand still or just run at you. That's about it. We find the generator room, along with Repta, who's guarding it. Unfortunately, Repta is a big old bullet sponge. Do enough damage and an explosion knocks him off the catwalk, disrupting the power system. We head further in and find a battle walker. Tangier informs us that we need to destroy 3 coolant tanks, which will then cause the entire lab to explode. The walker's okay, but the enemies weren't really a threat before, so there's no sense of power from it. It's slightly easier to kill enemies, I guess. Continuing my streak of evil, I slaughter every unarmed staff member we come across. As a great inquisitor once said, there is no such thing as innocence, only degrees of guilt. While destroying the coolant tanks, Molov sends out a new enemy type. Now these guys are the same as all the other humanoid enemies with guns. Not a whole lot of variety. A big issue is you kill so many that you just become numb to it, like I mentioned earlier. In most games you'll get some dopamine after defeating an enemy, especially in FPS. None of that here. There's some neat touches in the level design though. I appreciate some of the body horror. We destroy the coolant tanks and reach the top of the lab. Sopot's speech plays over an awkwardly animated cutscene, and now it's time for Molov, the final boss battle.
And for your own sake, today's sacrifice brings tomorrow's abundance.
Goodbye, Alias.
Fight! Fight, I say! Do not tell me that we cannot. We must! We must crush the Red Faction! We cannot tolerate these traitors in our midst!
She was always better at flirting than fighting. Once I dispose of you, my elite guard will recover the nanocell, and I will rule the Commonwealth.
The circular arena has a central pillar in the middle, so we use it as cover as we peek and fire, take cover, rinse and repeat. Shrike pops up for one final twist as he joins us against Molov. He gives us some aid via covering fire as we put down Molov for good. Shrike picks us up as the lab explodes, putting an end to Molov's schemes.
Coming in for you, Alias. The statue is about to blow. Shit. Miscalculation. I'm stuck. Come on, Alias. Let's get the hell out of here.
Alias was tried by the Red Faction government for the massacre in the Red Faction headquarters. Although the evidence of numerous murdered civilians was circumstantial, no one came forward to corroborate his version of events. He was convicted of murder and awaits execution. Tangier was rescued from the harbor by a passing garbage scow. She fell in love with the boat's captain, they married, and she lived happily ever after on the boat with her husband, 6 children, 2 dogs, and 3 cats. Judged to be too unstable to be trusted, Shrike was thrown out of the Commonwealth by the Red Faction government. Eventually, he was shot down as he smuggled bootleg copies of electronic games into the Commonwealth from third world countries.
Because I killed everyone we came across, we got the bad ending. There's 3 different types of endings depending on how many non-combatants you killed throughout the game. The video is the same, but the audio changes. Nothing too significant, it's about as different as the Mass Effect 3 endings, so that's nice. And that's Red Faction 2. A big step down from the first game in my opinion. I think the story premise could have worked if the gameplay itself was better. The game design is really what soured the whole thing for me. The shooting feels worse though, which really is the most important part of an FPS, wouldn't you say? It's not terrible, just not as responsive as the first game. Couple that with the endless enemies and the confusing level design, and it's just a chore to play. There really is no reason to play it over thousands of better FPS games. No, it didn't age well, and no, it's not worth playing in 2022. Picking it up cheap for your retro collection or nostalgia might be cool, but it just ain't doing it for me. That's the end. Thanks so much for watching. What are your thoughts on Red Faction 2? Please let me know in the comments.